So the Dutch uncle part is, I have a very good friend back home. He's probably my best friend. He's almost 80 years old. He's got grandkids. And I've seen these grandkids from the birth, now they're 25 years old. And when I discovered the Bereshit, you saw this one, the video, Bereshit. Yes, some of you. When I filmed that, I was in my office one night, this was 5 years ago, and I was making it for his granddaughter, nobody else. And a Dutch uncle is somebody who is not related, but who's older, who will always tell you the truth. Look it up, Dutch uncle. And that's, I'm her Dutch uncle. I'm not her real uncle. I'm just this older guy, friend of the family, and I always tell them the truth. So I filmed this video, and then I'm in Texas, she's in Pennsylvania. How do I get the video up there? And I thought, well, I'll put it on YouTube, and then I can send her the link to it or something. And that was like my first YouTube experience. And so she watched it, I assume, but so did 150,000 other people, which I wasn't expecting. And but it's kind of cool. And so people write to me and invite me to come and teach them. So that's the Dutch uncle part. So we have till 32?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, we're going to look at Genesis 15. This is probably, I don't know, this is a big story here. The Jews actually have a name for this story. It's called the Akedah. Maybe that could be your word you write down. Except I don't know how to spell it in Hebrew. But it's such an important story that they have a name for the story. The Akedah. And the word Akedah in Hebrew means the binding. Again, I don't know how to write it in Hebrew. Any idea, can anybody guess what this story might be about? Don't say the binding, but be more specific. Anyone? Bueller? They don't get that joke, do they?
We did.
I get it.
Okay. This is the binding of Isaac. Okay? Abraham, who's Abraham? He was just a guy. God chose Abraham. Why? He's God. He can choose whoever he wants. Right? So we can't question why he chose Abraham. He told Abraham to go, and he's going to give him this promised land. He also made a promise to Abraham in that, let's put Abraham's name up here. This was Abram. Do you know some of the letters? Or maybe from you watched the video? Okay. This is kind of cool how he works this out here. Abram's name, and you know what? We're going to have to, let's not copy all the Hebrew stuff that I write down, because you don't know Hebrew alphabet, and you're going to be trying to look up and down and copy exactly, and that's not going to help you. You're not going to remember it anyway. This is interesting. When the Jews sit in their church service, the Jews do not take notes. You put all pen, you just focus. Now, I know you're supposed to be taking notes, and there's some notes you can jot down, but keep that in mind. There is that option of not taking notes and just focusing and paying attention, especially if you're just copying and you're not even realizing what the letters are. So here's Abram's name. It's the letter Aleph. It's a Beit. It's a Resh. And a Mem. Okay, so God comes to Abram and says, Abram, you're going to have a son. Abram is 75 years old when God comes to him and says, you're going to have a son. It's interesting. This word Abram, look at this. This is Aleph, Beit. Aleph is the A sound. Beit is the B sound. That's the word Abba. Anyone know what Abba means? Father. Okay? So Abraham has in his name the word father. That's clever. He also has, if you take the second letter and the third letter, the Beit and the Resh, that's the word B-R, which in Hebrew is the word bar. Anyone know what bar means? Who said it? Son. Wow, look at this. Abram, he's got the name Father. The first two letters spell Father. The second two letters spell Bar, Son. What do you think might be the next? If you take these two letters, that's a Resh, an R sound, and an M sound. It's the word room in Hebrew. Room means high, lofty. Okay, so you could actually tear apart his name and say, Abram is the father of many high and lofty sons. That's kind of hidden in there. But what's even cleverer, is that a word? Cleverer, is this RM, somebody said the spirit for the third one. In Hebrew, the word spirit is ruach Elohim. Ruach Elohim starts with an R, ends with an M. Here's your R, here's your M. You see it? So it's interesting. The first two spell Abba, Father. The next two, that's the beginning and end of Bar, Son. And these two is the beginning and end of Ruach Elohim. So in Abram's name, you have Father, Son, and Spirit. Does that make sense? Yeah. Just by looking at the first and last letters of each section. So God comes to Abram at age 75 and says, and promises him, you're going to have more descendants than you'll be able to count. Okay? Well, he's 75. You know, when are you going to start this? So, Abram, his name is Abram, he gets changed later to Abraham. Abram is talking to his wife. His wife is 65 years old. Well, a 65-year-old woman ain't going to have many kids, you'd think, right? So she suggests, listen, I'm 65. I don't know if I can have a baby at this point. They had no kids. She suggests, why don't you sleep with my maidservant, Hagar? Are you familiar with this story? Hagar is the Egyptian maidservant, and so Abraham does. Now, when God makes a promise, it's not going to be a promise where he wants it to be a pure, perfect, beautiful fulfillment of the promise. He does. If he says, I'm going to promise you a child, a son, more than you can count, the descendants, that doesn't mean go out and find some woman to sleep with. It meant with your wife. You understand? Abraham and Sarah are like, okay, well, how are we going to do this? We're too old and she's too old. Maybe you can sleep with Hagar. Well, he does. And Hagar ends up having a son. Anyone know the name? The blue doesn't work very well. I'm not going to use red for this guy. Ishmael. This is Hagar's son. Sarah is the wife. God was not amused that he slept with Hagar and had this boy. But nevertheless, he still loves this boy. Abraham loves him. God loves him. People make mistakes, right? Now, years later, Sarah is 89 years old, Abraham is 99 years old. It's incredible. God comes to Abraham at 99 and says, Abraham, you're going to have a son. And Abraham, this is Genesis chapter 17, Abraham fell on the ground and laughed. Can you even imagine laughing at something God tells you? I don't think that sits well with God. You know, if he makes a promise, you go, yeah, right. No, it ain't going to work, right? You don't laugh at God's promise. And you know what God did? God says, oh, you're laughing? I'll tell you what. Next year at this time, in 1 year, you are going to have that son. And you are going to name him there's his name. That's a Yod. That's a Tzadi. Don't have to know these. That's a Chet. And this is a Kuf. That's the I sound, like E. That's a Tz sound. That's a Het sound. And that's a K. Okay? Yitzhak. Yitzhak. Do you know what that is in English? Isaac. Very nice. Now, what's really funny is this much right here, tzahak, that's the Hebrew word for laughter. And if you put a yud in front of it, that becomes a pronoun he. And the form of it becomes he will laugh. That's what Yitzhak name means. So now, every time Abraham thinks of his son, sees his son, calls his son, he's reminded, I laughed at God's promise. I laughed at who I'm calling. You understand? That is very cool on God's part. Very clever. Okay? You want to, and I don't know if you know this or not, but in the Hebrew, so it's he will laugh. In the Hebrew, every Hebrew letter has a number associated with it. Have you been told that, or do you know basically that? Okay. There's 22 Hebrew letters. For example, the tzadi is 90. Okay. A chet is the 8th letter, and its value is 8. The kuf, its value is 100. Okay. Now, what's clever about those is the 8. I just want to point out 8 and what refers to 8. Every number in the Bible has a meaning. When you talk about 3, you're talking about his complex unity, his Trinity, Father, Son, Spirit is 3, 3, 3, 3. 4 is the number of the earth. You have 4 directions: east, north, south, west. The 4 winds. 4 is the earth's number. 5 is the number for, like, wow, something big is going to be revealed, something's coming, it's just 5. And you'll see it. Jesus takes 5 loaves and he feeds 5,000. Hey, that's a big thing. When David goes against Goliath, David picks up 5 stones. Why 5? Hey, look out, something big is coming. Okay? All these numbers are in there. It's not an accident. If there's a number, it's a specific reason why that number is there, and it ties in with the meaning of that number. 6 is the number of man. Man was created on day 6. Antichrist is going to be a very, very bad man. And his number is 666, right? Antichrist. So every number has a meaning. 7 is God's perfection. It's complete. It's perfect. You see it. God made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he rested. That's 1 week, 7 days. Man didn't create a 7-day week. Man has tried to change it at times. They can't do it. It's still, God said this is an everlasting covenant, 7 days, okay? Or an everlasting covenant, but an everlasting thing, 7 days. You have 7 colors in the rainbow. Man didn't make the rainbow. Those 7 that's God's fingerprint. You understand? 7. It's complete. 7 notes on the music scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Do becomes the new octave, right? It's a new octave. But there are 7 notes on the scale. All right? So 7 is complete, perfect. 8 means new beginning. And if you think about it, there are 7 days in the week, and the 8th day becomes a new week, right? It's a new beginning. On the music scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that 8th note is a new octave, a new beginning, right? How about Noah's Ark? Anybody know how many people were on Noah's Ark? It was Noah and his wife, 3 sons, and their wives. 8. That's a new beginning. The whole world got wiped out, and now it's a new beginning with 8 people. Does that make sense? 8 new beginnings. Well, now that we know that, let's take a look here once again at Yitzhak's name. Yitzhak has an 8 in the middle. That's a new beginning. And who were his parents? Sarah and Abraham. How old was Sarah when she had him?
99.
She was 90. And how old was Abraham?
100.
God hid their ages in his name. A 90-year-old and a 100-year-old made new beginning at 8. That's clever. Every one of these names and words, they always have something deeper, another level that explains this. Okay, so this is Yitzhak. He will laugh. Now, when Isaac, he's about 30-some years old. They think maybe 35, 37 years old when this happens. God comes to Abraham and says, and we're going to just jump ahead here to what he says. Okay, we're in Genesis 22. This is the binding of Isaac. Is this in the way so you can't see better? Okay, the Akedah. Oh, there's how you spell Akedah, if you need to spell. Okay, now it came about after these things. This is in case the front row falls asleep. It came about after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, here am I. What a great response for God. If he calls your name, here am I. That's what you should answer. Don't be like Jonah and get on a boat heading in the opposite direction. And God said, take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I show you. Now, we got a problem here because God made a promise to Abraham. God cannot break a promise. He cannot lie. There's something, people say, oh, God, he can do anything. He can do everything. No, God cannot do everything. God cannot lie. There's something God cannot do. Okay? He can't do everything. He can't lie. He says, take now your son. Now remember, he promised Abraham that your descendants are going to be more numerous than the stars. You won't be able to count them. Or the sand on the seashore. You won't be able to count all the Jews that are going to come from you. They weren't called Jews at the time, but you understand, right? The descendants of Abraham are the Jews. There'll be so many you won't be able to count them. And now Abraham finally has this son, Isaac. And now God is telling him, take this son at age 35 and take him to this mountain that I tell you and sacrifice him. Do you see the problem? Now Abraham is 135 years old, and his wife is going to be, heaven knows, 120. They had their chance. This is that son that's going to, and now he wants him to go sacrifice him. That's crazy talk, okay? And you know what's kind of interesting? He said, remember, Abraham has two sons, doesn't he? He has Ishmael from the handmaid, Hagar, and he has his legitimate son, Isaac, with his wife. And what does he say? God says, take now your son, your only son, whom you love. By the way, that's the first mention of love in the Bible. It's always nice to know the first use of a word. It'll give you goosebumps. The first usage of a word in the Bible helps define that word. And this word love, that a father would sacrifice, I'm going to get choked up here. A father would offer willingly his son as a sacrifice. Where did we hear that before? You know, that's the whole Jesus story, isn't it? That God the Father offered his son whom he loved. So that's the first usage of the word love, and boy, it ties in just nicely, doesn't it? Perfectly with the big picture of the book. Now, you know, they're only showing here God's words, because I think it went something like this. God said, Abraham, take now your son. Abraham said, which one? Your only son. I have two. The one you love. I love them both. Isaac! He may not have screamed, but do you understand? There was probably a dialogue going on here. God, he made it. How clear can you make it? He kept narrowing it down, narrowing it down, narrowing it down. Isaac. 4 different times he described it. And take him and sacrifice him. Wow, that's huge. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey. Notice, he didn't, it's the next morning. He's gone. You know, the moment God told him to do that, that boy was dead in Abraham's brain. You understand? It's going to have to go 3 days walk to get to this mountain. But for those 3 days, in Abraham's brain, Isaac's a dead man. If you had to pick one word to define Abraham, that word, he is faith. He believed God. God promised him more descendants than ever, and now he's telling him, go sacrifice his son. Abraham says, come on, boy, let's go. Saddle up the donkeys, let's go. And he takes him immediately. We got 3 days hike, and then I'm going to, he doesn't tell him he's going to sacrifice him, but you understand, he doesn't even hesitate. Well, what about the promise God made him, that you'll descend? Oh, it doesn't matter. God, you told me to sacrifice this boy, I'm going to sacrifice him. You also told me I'm going to have more descendants than I can count. I don't know how you're going to put these two together, because this is my only shot of having more descendants is this kid, and you want me to go sacrifice him. Let's go. I'm going to do it. Now it's in your court, God. Do you understand the faith involved here? He believes God's going to give him more descendants than he could count, and he also is obeying God to go sacrifice his son. How do you weigh those two? You understand? Abraham, I don't know if I could do that. Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him. Notice he's taking 2 people with him, 2 workers. That's important because in the Bible, in Deuteronomy, it says, on the testimony of 2 or more, a matter is established. That's a rule in the law. You have to have 2 witnesses for something to be. So if he didn't take these 2, and all of a sudden here you are 3,000 years later, 4,000 years later, and someone say, oh, God, did that really happen, that whole Abraham story? God will say, oh, yeah, look, I got 2 witnesses. Bring them in. Did you see this happen? You understand? There's actually 4 witnesses. There's Abraham and Isaac and the 2 other witnesses. Okay? So God's following his own rules. And took two of his sons, young men with him, and Isaac his son, and he split wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place in which God told him. And on the third day, Abraham raised his eyes and saw the place from a distance. On the third day. Remember, the moment he told him, go sacrifice your son, his son is dead in his head, right? And now it's 3 days later. Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go over there. We will worship and return to you. Do you notice something there? You see that? You see this pronoun we? Abraham is telling these two witnesses, you guys wait here while Isaac and I go and worship, and we will return. He's not going to worship. What's he going to do? He's going to sacrifice, kill Isaac. Yet he uses the pronoun, we will return. How can we return if I'm going up to kill him? Why doesn't he say, you wait here while we go and worship and then I will return? He don't say that. He's under the assumption, again, God, this is your problem now. You told me I'm going to have more descendants, and now you want me to kill this kid? I'm going to do what you say. And it's, you got to either bring him back to life, or you got to stop me, or you got to do whatever you got to do, but you got to do it. I'm following what you say. That's hard to do, isn't it? But he's doing it. He takes him. And notice it's the third day, okay? Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took in his hand the fire and the knife, and the two of them walked together. Look, he's taking the wood of the burnt offering, and he puts it on Isaac. Isaac is having to carry the wood to his own sacrifice. Where have we seen that before? Jesus is carrying the wood to his own sacrifice. You see that there's a parallel here between the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Abraham, Isaac, Eliezer is actually the third. But there's a parallel between God, Father, Son, and Spirit, Abraham, the Father, Isaac, and the Spirit. This is a typology lesson. And there it is in the New Testament. And Jesus, bearing his cross, went forth into a place of the skull, which is known in Hebrew, Golgotha. So Isaac spoke to his father and said, my father. He said, here am I, son. He said, behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? That's a good question. And Abraham said, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. So the two of them walked together. Now, just so you understand this whole burnt offering thing, we're going to take 2 minutes and explain this. God has two qualities about him, or two sides to him. God is judgment. God is perfect. He's the perfect judge. If I don't, you're in the front row, so you're getting picked. But if I take this and I run him through and he's dead, and they take me before the judge, and the judge says, did you run that guy through with your spear? And I'll say, yes, Judge, I did, but I'm really, really sorry I did it. And the judge says, oh, you're sorry. Oh, well, if you're sorry, you may go free. Oh, thank you. And I leave. You know what? That's a bad judge. Yes? It's a horrible judge. A judge, a good, true, fair judge must punish. And God is a perfect judge. He has to punish. Make sense? He's judgment. But he has another side. You know what the other side is? Mercy.